I'm a proud Pennsylvania native, mother, homeowner, small business owner, and board member for Students for Sensible Drug Policy, the nation's leading youth-led network dedicated to ending the war on drugs. We're here today because it's time for Pennsylvania to adopt sensible, bipartisan cannabis policy reform. Reform that is rooted in evidence, compassion, and social justice. For far too long, outdated drug laws have harmed our communities, criminalized our neighbors, and stifled economic opportunity. The data is clear. Prohibition has failed, and it's time to replace punishment with policies that prioritize public health, equity, and freedom. Across the country, Republicans and Democrats alike are coming together to recognize that cannabis legalization isn't a partisan issue. It's a common sense issue. Legalization means safer products, stronger communities, new jobs, and a fairer justice system. It means investing in our future rather than clinging to the failed policies of the past. As Pennsylvanians, we have the opportunity to get this right, to build a cannabis industry that reflects our shared values of responsibility, fairness, and opportunity for all. Together, we can end the harms of prohibition and create a model for reform that works for everyone. Thank you for being here today to stand on the right side of history for sensible, evidence-based cannabis policy in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. At this time, I'd like to introduce Kat Murphy, SSDP's Executive Director.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Kat Murphy, and it's my great honor to stand before you as Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, or SSDP, the nation's largest youth-led network working to end the war on drugs and replace it with policies rooted in scientific evidence, compassion, and human rights. Our local leaders here in the great state of Pennsylvania have brought us all together for PA Cannabis Day of Unity because there's something seriously wrong in the Keystone State. Just last year, police arrested 12,707 Pennsylvanians for cannabis, a plant that is legal in the majority of the country, including every single state bordering Pennsylvania. Every arrest means another plate empty at the dinner table. Every arrest means another student losing their future, another parent losing a job or custody, another community losing trust in its institutions. Let's be clear, this isn't about whether people use cannabis. It's about whether we continue to criminalize otherwise law-abiding citizens and waste millions in taxpayer dollars enforcing a failed policy. But the war on cannabis in Pennsylvania is not an abstract policy debate. It's a war on each one of those 12,707 individuals. It's a war on their families, it's a war on their communities, and on the public health, safety, and economy of this entire state. We're here today because Pennsylvanians deserve better. They deserve sensible cannabis policies, full legalization, the end of arrests, and opportunities for growth, justice, and freedom. That's what makes SB 120 so important and so powerful. SB 120 offers a sensible, regulated approach that respects adult choice, creates jobs, generates new tax revenue, and frees law enforcement to focus on real public safety priorities. This bill is bipartisan. It brings together leaders from both sides of the aisle who recognize that cannabis reform is a common sense issue, one about fairness, freedom, and fiscal responsibility. And I am proud and genuinely inspired to be joined here not only by SSDPers from across Pennsylvania, but by advocates and organizations from every perspective. We may come from different backgrounds and different ideologies, but we are united in one shared belief. It's time for Pennsylvania to enact good policy grounded in reality, not fear. Because the truth is, prohibition does not make sense, and Pennsylvanians know it. This is the birthplace of American independence, the place where liberty itself was declared. Yet today, thousands still face arrest and lifelong consequences for conduct that's perfectly legal in neighboring states. This is our moment to change that. SB 120 gives Pennsylvania the chance to make history once again, to replace punishment with progress, to honor the spirit of freedom that was born right here in Pennsylvania, and to show that unity and common sense can prevail over fear and division. The war on drugs has always been a war on us, on our generation, on our communities, on our future. But together, across party lines and across Pennsylvania, we can end it. But that won't happen on its own. Lawmakers must act now, this session, to end arrests, legalize cannabis, and make history once again, right here in the birthplace of American liberty. Students for Sensible Drug Policy stands with the people of Pennsylvania in saying it clearly. It's time to legalize cannabis. It's time to make history again. Thank you. And for over a century, the American Civil Liberties Union has steadfastly defended constitutional rights in America. To kick us off today, I would like to invite up Alex Domingos of the ACLU of Pennsylvania.
Good morning. On behalf of the ACLU of Pennsylvania and our members across the Commonwealth, today I want to talk to you about what our communities are up against. A patchwork of contradictory policies around cannabis that serves no one. Statewide medical cannabis is legal, but in some Pennsylvania cities and counties like Philadelphia, small amounts are decriminalized, and others it still leads to arrest because recreational use remains illegal across the Commonwealth. If you head to our neighboring states like New Jersey, New York, Maryland, or Ohio, you'll find legitimate cannabis dispensaries and cities experiencing economic growth from the revenue legal cannabis provides. This map of prohibition of red light and green light districts creates a confusing maze where something is acceptable on one side of the street and a criminal offense on the other. This legal chaos does not make us safer. We need laws that make sense, that Pennsylvanians can understand. We need continuity so that our residents aren't subjected to traps that get them unnecessarily ensnared in a criminal legal system, permanently tarnishing their lives. And this maze is not just nonsensical, it's biased. We cannot ignore the stark racial injustice and how these laws are enforced. In 2023, 53% of people sentenced to incarceration for possessing less than 30 grams of cannabis were black. That's 4.7 times higher than it would be if enforcement reflected our state's demographics. Our black neighbors are nearly 5 times more likely to be incarcerated for the same conduct. That's not just unfair, it's a moral and constitutional failure that we must address. Criminal records, of course, create barriers to employment, housing, and education, roadblocks that follow our community members and keep them from building thriving lives for themselves and their families. That's not justice. That's not making anyone safer. That is not the Pennsylvania that we want to be. Let's clearly illustrate what overpushing cannabis has cost us. Every dollar that we spend on enforcement, prosecution, and incarceration for simple possession is a dollar that we're not investing with what our communities actually need: mental health programs, education resources, and affordable housing. These are the restorative investments that strengthen and repair communities, especially those disparaged and damaged by the war on drugs. When we pour resources into criminalizing cannabis, we're choosing harm over healing and choosing punishment over practicality. The public consensus is overwhelmingly in favor of legalization. It's time for our laws to catch up with the opinion of the people and free individuals to make their own decisions about cannabis, just as our neighboring states have already done. The problem isn't cannabis. It's how much of our tax dollars that we waste on the highest overpolicing of its possession. We're here with our allies today in support of legalization because it's a clear-cut opportunity to redirect these resources and create a safer, fairer Pennsylvania for all of us. We're calling upon our legislators to move forward with a thoughtful approach that prioritizes public safety and social justice this session. As of 2025, at least 24 states in the District of Columbia have already legalized adult-use cannabis. Let's join them and leave behind the outdated policies that cause more damage to our communities than good. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex Domingos of the ACLU of Pennsylvania. Cannabis prohibition destroys lives daily. And for someone facing jail time for something that should have never been a crime, a public defender can be their most important ally. I'd like to invite Sarah Jacobson of the Public Defender Association of Pennsylvania to share her perspective.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Jacobson. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Defender Association of Pennsylvania, PDAP. PDAP trains and supports public defenders across the state and serves to be the policy voice for public defense in spaces like these. Pennsylvania should legalize cannabis. Legalizing cannabis would improve policing, it would make our courts fairer spaces, and would bring in revenue at a time that Pennsylvania desperately needs it. PDAP supports HB 20, which is a bill to legalize cannabis that also includes provisions for indigent defense funding from the tax revenues from cannabis sales. But if Pennsylvania won't legalize cannabis, it should decriminalize it. Decriminalizing cannabis would free up important law enforcement resources and would reduce racial disparities in our courts. Let's start with the resources. Over the last decade, police made over 150,000 arrests in Pennsylvania for possession of a small amount of marijuana. That's 150,000 times the police could have been investigating serious offenses. 150,000 cases where prosecutors and defense attorneys could have been prosecuting and defending other kinds of cases. Our criminal courts are underfunded. No one knows that better than public defenders. Decriminalizing cannabis would free up hundreds of hours in our criminal courts for serious offenses. Decriminalizing cannabis would also ease racial disparities in our courts. We know from national surveys that approximately the same percentage of white people and black people report using cannabis. But in Pennsylvania, black people are 5 times more likely to be arrested for possession of a small amount of marijuana. We know that's not good. Recent studies comparing decriminalization efforts in Philadelphia and Dauphin County here, where cannabis was not decriminalized, show that decriminalization eases racial disparities. So it unclogs our courts. It removes some of the bias from our courts. It makes good common sense. Look, Pennsylvania should legalize marijuana like our neighboring states have. But if the General Assembly isn't willing to do that, it should at least decriminalize it. The PDAP supports the legislation that would decriminalize cannabis in Pennsylvania. We support the policy suggestions that the Marijuana Policy Project made to approve that legislation, and we ask members of the General Assembly to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sarah Jacobson of the Public Defender Association of Pennsylvania. The war on drugs has deteriorated community trust in police and actively works against law enforcement's ability to ensure public safety. On behalf of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, I would like to invite up Christy M. Smith, who synthesizes more than 2 decades of experience as an adult probation and parole officer, academic and policy expert to advance smart criminal justice and public safety initiatives.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Dr. Christy Smith, and I am here on behalf of LEAP, which is the Law Enforcement Action Action Partnership. For the past 20 years, as was mentioned, I've held dual careers as an adult probation and parole officer for 2 of Philadelphia's collar counties. I've also embraced careers in academia and as a researcher for a leading think tank in Washington, D.C. I conducted cannabis research to guide public safety, legislation, and policies. More importantly, I'm here as a mom. 10 years ago, if someone would have predicted that I would be here standing and advocating for the legalization of cannabis, I would have thought they were crazy. I spent my career enforcing prohibition and penalizing people for the use of marijuana. But after I transitioned to academia and embraced the existing research, I began to question the utility of this approach. And I wasn't alone. 2/3 of law enforcement officers across the nation support the legalization of cannabis. In Pennsylvania, the legal and moral gray area, where cannabis is legal as medicine and is decriminalized in some jurisdictions, but remains prohibited for adult consumption, sends a mixed message to community members and public safety officials. This threatens the legitimacy of our legal system, it wastes precious fiscal and public safety resources, it increases negative police-citizen interactions, and unnecessarily ensnares otherwise law-abiding individuals in our criminal justice system in perpetuity. As a mom to 2 young children, I see clearly how legalization and sensible regulation is needed to ensure quality controls, including product testing and labeling, restricted access to minors, and secure packaging. We should never let fear, or worse yet, apathy, dictate public policy. It's imperative that our legislators rely on the current body of scientific research. Legalization and sensible regulation of cannabis enhances public safety, restores police legitimacy, and ensures consumer protection for the citizens of this great commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy Smith, former adult parole and probation officer, and speaking on behalf of Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Instead of making us safer, prohibition has directly caused the opioid overdose crisis in this country. Now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 44. After losing her son in 2020, Susan Austerman channeled her profound grief into action for societal betterment, founding the Loma Foundation, which fosters healing and empowerment, challenges stigmas, and advances evidence-based, equity-centered treatments and sensible drug policy reform. Susan, thank you for joining us here today.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I come to you today not as someone who would personally benefit from the legalization of cannabis for personal use or for sales, but as someone who did everything right in our society, how we're told to live and achieve the American dream. I raised my kids in the suburbs. I was a board member of the PTA and spent my weekends on soccer fields. I followed the framework until I was forced to reckon with a very painful reality. We're here today to talk about cannabis, but once you understand the harm caused by the iron law prohibition, it's impossible not to see how it affects all substances and all of us. What has the prohibition of cannabis and other drugs actually achieved? Well, it's been wildly successful in punishing people, in dividing communities, preventing people from thriving, filling prisons, and perpetuating racism and oppression. It's been successful in every way except the way we thought it was. It has failed to protect public health and safety. It has failed to prevent drug use. It has failed to help people stop using. It has failed to end violence and despair surrounding drugs. And it has failed my family in the most profound way. After years of struggling with opioid use and finding no help in the systems that we continue to fund and defend, my son finally found something that worked: legal medical cannabis. just a small amount that calmed his cravings and gave him hope. But because a few government officials were either too confused by or indifferent to the conflict between state and federal cannabis laws, he was denied access to the care that he needed. He was denied the care that he was entitled to by law and by basic human decency. And a direct result of this was the loss of his life. So as a mother who lost her son to substance use, well, I prefer to say he lost his life to prohibition. But either way, I never imagined I would be standing here supporting the legalization and regulation of all drugs. But after 5 years of grieving, unlearning, and seeing what prohibition truly does, I don't feel we have another choice. These punitive half-measure policies are rooted in judgment and control, not in public health or safety, and they are the cause of immense suffering. There was a time that I believed that my son wasn't like those people, but his death shattered that illusion and showed me that he was not one of them. But we are all the same. They are all of us. We must legalize and regulate cannabis in Pennsylvania, and eventually all drugs across the board, and make sure no one is criminalized for seeking relief. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing that deeply personal story. I'm so hurt by how much our system has failed you and so many families like you. As a trauma-informed care navigator, harm reductionist, mental health advocate, MSc student of psychology focused on cannabis research, and an elected member of SSDP's Youth-Led Board of Directors, Maren Spence is a tireless advocate for much-needed policy reform here in Pennsylvania. Maren?
Hi everyone, it's an honor to be here today. My name is Maren Spence. I'm a graduate student, elected board member of SSDP, former grower in the medical cannabis industry, and from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I believe deeply in building a future rooted in justice, health, equity, and common sense. Today I stand in support of SB 120, a bipartisan bill that does something more than simply legalize adult use cannabis. It says we are ready to reform, reinvest, and restore. Legalization isn't just about access, it's about equity. It's about reinvestment in the communities that have carried the weight of the failed drug war for far too long. It establishes the Cannabis Control Board, provides disproportionately impacted areas, and for a cannabis-clean slate. This is about more than access. It's about a path towards repair. I'm going to share just a few highlights of the bill. The bill legalizes cannabis for adults 21 and older and highlights responsible regulation. It is centered all throughout the bill. Number 2, it explicitly includes expungement on low-level cannabis offenses and prioritizes real opportunities for small and minority-owned businesses and reinvests in neighborhoods most harmed by past enforcement. 3, it will impose a sales tax and enact a cannabis control board. Every representative that we've met with this week has spoken to the massive deficit in the PA budget. This provides one solution forward. We all know that our neighbors in surrounding states already have adult use systems. Pennsylvania is ready. Our communities are ready, and our economy is ready. So I ask today our senators and representatives to be bold, be just, and be on the right side of history. Pass SB 120, not just for adult use, but for equity, for accountability, for community health and well-being. Thank you for your time and your energy.
Thank you, Maren. It is my great pleasure to introduce Senator Sharif Street, co-sponsor of SB 120, the Lawmakers Bipartisan Adult Use Marijuana Legalization Bill, and a remarkable leader demonstrating how Democrats and Republicans can work together to ensure the vitality of Pennsylvania's world-class medical marijuana industry while creating thousands of jobs and generating hundreds of millions of dollars in new tax revenue for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is good to be here with everyone today. The time to end the prohibition on adult use cannabis is now. It's now for so many reasons. It's now because what we already have a proliferation of cannabis that is unregulated, and much of it is synthetic and not nearly as good for you as natural cannabis that isn't chemically altered. Right. So we need to pass 120 because it would then regulate those products and allow cannabis that people want to use to be consumed by adults. Additionally, Senate Bill 120 would put in place regulations so that we can keep cannabis out of the hands of young people. And finally, when I mentioned, we have a little bit of a budget issue. Cannabis is a way to close our budget hole, which will allow money for schools, which will allow money for tax reductions, which will allow money to fund violence reduction programs, drug mitigation programs. There are so many things that it would allow us to do. Additionally, in states in which we legalize adult use cannabis, opioid addiction goes down. Because yes, we have a medical program, but there are some people that don't want to be stigmatized by saying that they have a medical issue. And simply will say, you know what, I don't have a medical issue. My back just hurts. I don't have a medical issue. I just have aching knees. I don't have a medical issue. I just need to be able to sleep. Those folks are in fact self-medicating. And if they had the option of using adult use cannabis, they would. Additionally, the revenue is already going across the border, from whether it's New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland. The states around us have legalized the adult use of cannabis, and so Pennsylvanians are just going across the border and having to break the law by transporting across state lines, and we lose the revenue. Additionally, the Cannabis Control Board would make so much more sense, staffed by the Department of Agriculture, rather than burdening the Department of Health. It would allow us to have more common sense regulations to grow our market. The bill also allows some things like for medical patients, home grow. That's something that makes common sense. There's no reason that people whose health insurance does not cover cannabis, who have to pay out of pocket, shouldn't be able to be engaged in home grow. It would bring down the cost of them getting valuable medication that they need. There are so many aspects and reasons we need to move forward. But the reality is that time has passed. Well over three-quarters of Democrats and Republicans support the legalization of adult use cannabis. People in rural areas and urban areas alike. And finally, I'll talk about one of the reasons that I first started paying attention to this issue. And that is, while cannabis usage is relatively the same whether you're black or white, wealthy or poor, we know that the law enforcement encounters by black and brown folks are 4 to 5 times greater than law enforcement encounters related to cannabis by white folks. We also don't track data on it, but intuitively we all know that if you're wealthy and white and you're using cannabis, you're much less likely to have a legal issue than if you're a poor white person in a community using cannabis. So if we're going to let rich people do it, and we're going to let white folks do it, but if you're poor and white, or you're just black and brown, we're going to penalize you. You're going to have these law enforcement encounters. We've already decided we don't really think this is a legal issue. So there's a level of equity that would come out of the legalization of adult use cannabis. And finally, in a legalized adult use market, children are much less likely to access cannabis. And while there are studies have shown there are no residual negative effects for adult use cannabis amongst adults, people using it can cause some challenges. And so we can get it out of the hands of kids, create revenue that we can use that the Commonwealth desperately needs. We can create more equity, and we can do this in a way that is consistent with the desires of Pennsylvanians in a broad-based way. This bill has bipartisan support. Senator Lawler and I worked together on it. It has bicameral support. A similar bills have worked for by Representative Kennedy, Representative Andrew Majors, as well as Representative Alvin Brown. This bill has bicameral and bipartisan support. It's time to advance the legalization of adult use cannabis. It's time for us to move forward. I would say, and the time to do it is now. Pennsylvania should no longer have to wait for us to figure out how to deal with budget problems. Pennsylvania is wanting us to advance this legislation and get it done. So, for everyone out there, make sure you talk to your state rep or your senator and tell them if they're not already signed on to a bill to sign on. Make sure that you talk to leadership and say, let's move forward with it. It's already proposed. Revenue is already anticipated by the governor's budget. It's just time for the General Assembly to move forward with legalization of adult use cannabis. It will be good for Pennsylvania's revenue. It will be good for social equity. It'll be good across the board. And by the way, that I mentioned, really social equity licenses, social equity grants, something else we need to move forward with. So thank you everybody for being here. Let's make sure you knock on some doors, talk to some people, make some phone calls, tweet, like, post it on Instagram, Snapchat, whatever other social media platforms you do. Let's get the word out. Let's legalize adult use cannabis, and let's do it now.
On behalf of SSDP and our 400 plus members right here in the great state of Pennsylvania, I'd like to thank Senator Street and his co-sponsor, Senator Laughlin, for their bipartisan leadership in sponsoring SB 120. It's so important that we bring this across the line and that we finally legalize cannabis here in Pennsylvania. It's simply a common sense issue. It's not a partisan issue. Let's stop arresting the 12,000 plus Pennsylvanians every year who go to jail because of cannabis. As the founder of Free My Weed Man, a community-driven streetwear brand rooted in amplifying the stories of survivors of the war on drugs, Crystal Bush exemplifies how small business owners are leading the fight for cannabis legalization right here in Pennsylvania. Crystal.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Crystal Bush, and I am the founder of Free My Weed Man. And leaving Harrisburg yesterday, I had this feeling that I just couldn't quite name, right? That it's a shift that's happening in this state. Or maybe it's just the pressure that I felt from so many elected officials we met with, that we are 120 days in and still no budget. I walked through these cannabis hallways more times than I can count. And I stood on these steps yelling "Free My Weed Man" to the top of my lungs until my throat cracked. Thinking that there's something that we all could agree on, which is freedom, fairness, and justice. But there are too many voices in this building guided by who pays and not by who's harmed. And we're here to change that. While we support SB 120, we cannot support any new system that uses taxpayer dollars to overregulate and criminalize the very people in this industry that it has already excluded. We came here today with 3 clear demands. That is 1, decriminalize marijuana. That is 2, release everyone that's in prison for cannabis. And that is 3, automatic expungements. And yesterday, during our drop-ins with elected officials, one looked at us in the face and said, well, if you can pick one, what would you choose? But how do you choose when families and communities are being torn apart? How do you choose when it's taxpayer dollars that's paying $165 a day to incarcerate someone? Now let's be clear. We don't need a budget to pass to decriminalize marijuana. We don't need to wait for a budget to pass to release everyone that's locked up for cannabis. And we definitely don't need a budget to pass to automatically clear cannabis records. We cannot afford the illusion of progress while people are losing years of their lives due to this war on drugs. Last year alone, Pennsylvania arrested over 12,000 people for marijuana. We support a control board, but not stacked with bad actors. No one, we're the same people who cause the harm get to control our future. And if you're serious about justice, then this board must include people who know what harm looks like, and that is us. It must include people who know what repair looks like, and that is us. Because democracy isn't just being tested in DC. It's being tested right here in Pennsylvania, where money keeps winning over morals and values. So we're here to say enough is enough, legalize cannabis, and free my weed man.
Thank you, Crystal, for tirelessly speaking up for the thousands of Pennsylvanians still in prison. 12,707 people were arrested for cannabis crimes right here in the state of Pennsylvania just last year. Over 90% of those were for simple possession. That's 12,707 people who did not get to go home. 12,707 dinner tables with an empty seat. 12,707 families torn apart. Since 1970, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML, has advocated for the rights of marijuana consumers. And there's perhaps no more dedicated advocate for those rights right here in Pennsylvania than the indefatigable Teresa Nightingale.
Okay, hi everybody. Crystal's kind of hard to follow, so I'll just be quick. Great. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Of course, Pittsburgh NORML and NORML in general supports full comprehensive adult reform. They support the Laughlin Street bill, also the Emily Kincaid Abbott Major bill as well. But today I'm here to speak in support of Senate Bill 49, which is also introduced by Senator Laughlin and supported by Senator Street. I'm here today as the Executive Director of Pittsburgh NORML, a proud mom, and a double cancer survivor. My journey has shown me the vital role medical marijuana plays in healing, which is why I support Senate Bill 49 and comprehensive cannabis reform in Pennsylvania. The political landscape has changed. We're at a crucial moment in Pennsylvania. While not all Senate Republicans support legalization, their focus on law and order and public safety means we can beat them with the Senate Bill 49. This proposal is not just about legalization, it's about accountability and safety. It allows lawmakers to clean up an unregulated market while protecting our children. Intoxicating hemp products are blurring the line between legal and illegal THC, undermining our medical marijuana program. A cannabis control board is a bipartisan solution to enforce our laws and protect consumers, something states like Ohio and Illinois are already pursuing. By establishing clear regulations now, we can make future adult use legalization smoother. Learning from other states, we can avoid their pitfalls and prepare Pennsylvania for responsible cannabis policies. The bottom line is, Senate Bill 49 is about restoring order, protecting consumers, and setting a strong foundation for adult use legalization. It's a politically realistic option that we can all support. As a mom and cancer survivor, I urge you to back Senate Bill 49. Let's take this important step for our families and our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa, for reminding us and everyone here in the building that there are many pathways forward, but what is clear is that we must take action, that our legislators must take action this session to decriminalize marijuana and stop the arrests. To close us out today, I'd like to invite up Adam Smith, a 30-year veteran of the drug policy reform movement who helped found SSDP and now serves as Executive Director of the Marijuana Policy Project, an organization whose tagline is, quite fittingly, "We change laws."
Good morning. My name is Adam Smith with the Marijuana Policy Project. Since Pennsylvania criminalized marijuana in 1933, well over 500,000 Pennsylvanians have been arrested for cannabis. Last year alone, Pennsylvania police made over 11,000 arrests for cannabis possession, diverting resources from crimes that are natural victims. For what? What has prohibition accomplished for Pennsylvania? It hasn't made the cannabis go away. An estimated 2 million Pennsylvanians have used cannabis in the past year. Cannabis is here, and a century of prohibition hasn't changed that. The question isn't whether Pennsylvanians will use cannabis. The question is whether the cannabis that Pennsylvanians use will be regulated, tested, and taxed, or whether it will continue to be unregulated, untested, and untaxed. It hasn't protected kids. According to data released last year by the Centers for Disease Control, youth cannabis use significantly declined in 19 of the 21 states that they have data for post-legalization. Regulated sales puts the cannabis trade in the hands of licensees who are accountable to the state. That means age gating every time. And age gating means reduction in underage access and underage use. It hasn't protected public health. Illicit cannabis products are often contaminated with banned pesticides, heavy metals, mold and fungus, and dangerous synthetics. Regulated markets protect public health through testing and accurate labeling. Regulation will make Pennsylvania's cannabis use less dangerous. It hasn't been popular. Data suggests that 70% of Pennsylvanians favor regulation over prohibition. And for all that, prohibition hasn't benefited the state. Today, Pennsylvanians buy their cannabis from untaxed illicit markets, enriching criminals rather than supporting local economies. Or they cross state lines to buy legal cannabis elsewhere, spurring economic activity and filling the tax coffers of neighboring states with revenues that Pennsylvania desperately needs. A regulated cannabis market will produce hundreds of millions of dollars in new state revenues while creating thousands of jobs and economic opportunity. Today, we call on the Pennsylvania legislature to step away from nearly a century of failed and destructive prohibition and into a more rational, regulated future, ending thousands upon thousands of pointless arrests, significantly reducing youth access and use, protecting public health and safety, creating thousands of new jobs, spurring economic opportunity, and bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in desperately needed new tax revenues for the state and the people of Pennsylvania.
In closing, today's conversation isn't just about cannabis. It's about justice, opportunity, and the kind of future we want for Pennsylvania. It's about listening to evidence, not fear. It's about compassion over criminalization. And it's about creating policy that reflects our shared values across party lines, across generations, and across communities. We have a chance to lead, to replace prohibition with progress and punishment with possibility. Legalizing cannabis for adult use is not a radical idea, it's a responsible one. It's time for Pennsylvania to stop watching from the sidelines while our neighbors move forward. Let's craft legislation that uplifts small businesses, restores communities harmed by outdated laws, and ensures that every Pennsylvanian benefits from this new chapter, not just a privileged few. On behalf of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, I invite every lawmaker, advocate, and citizen to join us in demanding sensible, evidence-based cannabis reform that prioritizes people over politics. The time is now to legalize cannabis in Pennsylvania.